Hello, my name is Lois, and I'm an Ivy Tech librarian, and I'm here today to talk to you about how to do research for SOCI 111. This is an introduction to the library site, resources, and databases that you will be using to find sources to support the arguments that you make when you are doing research. And so we will be covering a couple of things today. The first is we're going to be talking about our library services. And we'll be covering the tutoring services and the library services and where to access those when you are on the library site. We'll also be talking about Ivy Tech databases, A to Z resources, where all of the individual databases can be found. We'll also be talking about opposing viewpoints, academic search complete, and social sciences full text, which is a subject-specific database. We'll also be looking at community resources such as the Indy Star, Mirror Indy, and 211, also known as findhelp.org. So today we are going to start by talking about how to take a huge topic like, say, the type of your class and the type of class you're in, which is sociology, and to take all the things that you are studying and learning in your class and then boiling it down to something specific and doing research on one thing out of all the things that you've been learning during your class. And so a lot of times, I suggest to students to look at the readings that you have been given by your teacher. I mentioned talking to your teacher, knowing what the requirements are for your assignment. Obviously, that is also going to drive what you choose. But then I also say, if you have if you're so fortunate to be able to choose a topic, I always encourage people to choose something that is compelling and that matters to them. And so in sociology, I know it covers a lot of different areas. And so for this demo today, I am going to focus on something that I know is important to many people. And that is the topic of income inequality and how it impacts people's mental health. And so finances and all the things related to making money, paying bills, prioritizing what one needs to live safely and healthily, and then also having money to do things that enhances and enriches life. That practice or going through all of that can really have a toll on people's health and the way their brains and how they think, and of course also the income inequality piece, meaning how some people have more than others and some people have advantages while others don't. This all is a topic that is impacts people all over, but obviously in different ways. And so if I was going to do a research paper, I would go here. Now, when we are talking about these big topics, a lot of times I always encourage people to think about the questions that they have about the topic when they are when they are approaching this paper stage or this presentation stage, because ultimately what your paper or presentation is a response to a question that you have about a certain thing or topic or problem. And so I have a lot of questions about this topic that I've chosen, something that's near and dear to my heart, this income inequality and mental health. So if this is something that I want to look at more closely, what are some questions that I have to start? Well, I'm curious about how income inequality within a community impacts the mental health of its residents. So we have one community that has a lot of people living in it. Everybody has differing incomes, or, they might have less in their neighborhood versus another. How does that play into how the mental health of people who live there? Another question I have is about the long-term effects of growing up in an income unequal environment and what the impact is on the mental health of children and adults. So what are those long-term, what's going to happen to children who are under the age of 10? They're growing up in a place where they may not have everything that they need to be completely healthy. How does that play out when they become an adult or are raising children themselves? How about that past? How does that impact them? And then another question I have is, how do public policies and government interventions that address income inequality influence community mental health? So again, I also have questions about the law and about how the system itself, what is that? How does that play a role in both income inequality and mental health, and how they overlap? So these three questions are ones that I came up with regarding the income inequality and mental health. I did that knowing that I would eventually have to narrow these down. And I do this because I know I'm just writing one paper. I know I'm giving one presentation. I know I'm in a short class. I know that while this is a huge topic, just like sociology was a huge topic, I know I also need to wrangle what I actually want to look at, because I know the search is going to be very complicated if I just type in sociology or money or income or something like that. So I need to be specific. So today what I'm going to do in this demo is show you students, and as a model for instructors, to how to do research based off of this question. How does income inequality within a community impact the mental health of its residents? So I want to know the community impact, and I want to know how it manifests in the people who live there. So once I have my research question, the next thing I want to do, and this is actually something that could still be a work in progress, but it does give us some direction as we begin to research. After I develop my research question about the topic that I'm curiously looking at, the thesis is next. Now, the thesis can always change, and the thesis is something that you might see again, or that might, maybe be tweaked a bit as you do your research. But before you start your research, or as you're starting to look for different sources, it's important to establish what your argument is, because you're trying to find support to argue this effectively, or to rationalize it throughout your paper. So if I said, how does income inequality within a community impact the mental health of its residents? My answer, AKA my thesis, also found in my first paragraph of my paper, would be this, in this example. Income inequality negatively affects residents' mental health by creating barriers to support and fostering a sense of economic and social instability. Okay, so I am claiming in my paper that I'm about to write that income inequality is not good. It is not good for people who are living in an environment where there are things getting in the way to help them become more stable financially. And so it does impact their mental health. It does impact their mental well-being. And so I am going to be arguing throughout my paper that income inequality really is not good for mental health, and it does it perpetuates this life of instability. And so since I'm saying that, and that's my argument, AKA my thesis, the next step will be to find sources to support that argument. And that's what I'm going to be leading you through today, is how to find effective information that will also support it or agree with it, and also potentially challenge what you're thinking in terms of how this plays out. And so once I have this thesis identified, it sort of looks like this, and it's almost like an inverted triangle, or how it's a mystery shape. But if we were looking at something that was big like sociology, and that's a big topic, and then I choose something within it, this income inequality and mental health, which ties to things that are experienced by groups of people. Then I come up with my research question, and then I have my answer. So all of these things and that whole process of saying, stop before I do anything, what am I even doing? You kind of have to go through this process so you at least have some kind of direction. Because direction is going to be essential when you start doing keyword searching, which is what I'm going to show you. And so once we have all these things identified, and most importantly, a working thesis, the next step is to develop keywords. And when you're developing keywords, this is something I personally like to do from the very beginning, knowing I'm going to be adding to this list. I try to come up with as many words as I can that tie to the thesis and or the research question. And I do it because I'm going to be using these words when I start plugging them into a search engine within our databases. And so very similarly to Google, you know that while there's a lot of things to click on the internet, Google itself functions as a system that requires you typing in specific words so you can get the output that you want. So for example, if you were doing something you've probably all done at least at one stage, which is look for housing, if you were doing a Google search, you probably type in something like the name of the city or town you want to live in. So I might type in Indianapolis. Say I want to live in a 2-bedroom, and those are the number of bedrooms I want. Say I want to live in a house. I don't want to necessarily live in an apartment. Maybe I want to live in a condo. Maybe I want to live in a duplex. I'm going to type in that word. I'm going to type in whether or not it's child friendly. Maybe I'm going to type in whether it's dog friendly. Maybe I want a pool. But if those are the things that I want from Google when I'm searching for a home, I'm going to have to type those in with words. That's called keyword searching. And so here with our thesis, when we're searching, our keyword searching, what we do, or what I like to do and I encourage students to do, is to develop some words or a word list so then you can use those with when you are searching, like words that are tied to what you're searching for. Then the thought is you'll be able to use these keywords to find articles that tie to that argument. So income inequality, you see I have it here. I also have it with quote marks, which is intentional. Economic disparity, economic by itself. Social inequality, again with quotes, and it would be different without them. Mental health, anxiety, self-esteem, depression, uncertainty, stress, all words that we could use to describe when we are going through a particular kind of anguish over something. So all these different words. And then we're saying that this income inequality is really, it puts up barriers to progress in one's life. And so other words for that are obstacles, limitations, restrictions, accessibility. All of these things here are words I use because I'm going to be doing that keyword search. And then ultimately, it plays out here in the 4 different ways that I'm going to demonstrate, where we take those keywords and then we plug those in our databases to get articles. And so the first sweep I do will be income inequality and mental health. So I'm going to do those together, just pulling in 2 words. I know you think you see 5, but I'm talking about this being one word, this being one word, and this, which I'll explain in the demonstration. Then we're going to look at words that are similar. And when we talk about words that are similar, we're talking about uh, synonyms. And so I might use income and inequality again, but instead of mental health, anxiety and family. Next, we're going to be looking, my apologies. Next, we're going to be looking at a general database called Academic Search Complete. And then we will look at a subject-specific database called Social Sciences Full Text. And so we'll be talking about all of those different things in different ways to do keyword searching. And primarily we're going to do that because I want to show you all these on-ramps when which that occur when you are trying to find information. You might think there's just one way, but I want to tell you that there are multiple ways, and I want you to be comfortable with all of those. So with those things said, I'm going to go ahead and start to show you how you would do a search with on our library databases. So today we are going to start with my Ivy. And when we start with my Ivy, we are going to, I always like to show students where to go from here because you may or may not be familiar with the library site, but I'm sure, I know it, you are very familiar with my Ivy. And so my Ivy is, you know, our home base, our first base, the place that we start. And I say the best way of finding our library site is going up to this search box in the top left-hand corner. I suggest that you type in library, and then you'll have two different spots. And I'm going to go ahead and click, we have library for me, Indianapolis. This is when I click library with nothing beside it, it simply brings me to my home campus. I am an Indianapolis-based librarian, and so all my account is associated with this campus. And there are many reasons why I would use this library site. I use it quite a bit in terms of, I use a lot when I have an Indianapolis-based audience. I use it when I am talking face-to-face, and I do that because this information here has a lot of the same, these are things that someone from Indianapolis would need at this moment in time when I'm recording this presentation. But we also have a statewide library site that is just as effective. It just doesn't have the personalization of, hey, we have new hours, because it's going to impact you and you live in our community. If somebody lives in South Bend and they're looking at, you know, and they need a library site, they actually have their own campus library site. And we also have something that is a statewide site. So once again, if I was in the top left-hand corner and I typed in library, if I went to library statewide, that would take me to this site. And this site is a good one to go to. I recommend it to everyone. I use it with actually a large portion of students because so many students take Ivy online classes. So just know that we have two different sites, and one is for your affiliated home campus, and the other one is for statewide and Ivy online. Everyone, even if they attend every single class in person, is still, this would still work for them no matter where they're going to school on campus, or I'm sorry, in the state of Indiana. So whatever campus, anywhere in Indiana. So we're going to go ahead and use a statewide and Ivy online site today as our demonstration. But if I encourage anyone who has an Indianapolis site or a campus, or if you're curious about your other campuses, that you reach out to them. And the best way of doing that when you're on the statewide and Ivy online site is to look here. This campus library websites, if you click here and you are a student anywhere in the state, you can see the listed libraries or campuses that have libraries. And if you wanted to see your campus library, if you click, say, let's go to a place that's near and dear to my heart, Bloomington. If we click Bloomington here, you see that we have a Bloomington library and their website looks like the way they want to in Bloomington. Okay. And so I would encourage you, if you have follow-up questions after you view this information after you view this recording, I would encourage you to find your library site on this list and reach out to one of those librarians. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about keyword searching as I started talking about a few minutes ago. So when we are here and we're on the Ivy Tech statewide and Ivy Online Library site, there are a couple of places that one can look for for different sources. And so if you're looking at Start with Discover, that's a place so you can go to search everything in our catalog. If I just typed in, let's say, money into the search engine, I'm going to get a lot of hits. I could get as many as, let's see, we have here, looks like nearly 12 million hits just based off of the word money. Everything on this left-hand side is going to show me the books, the ebooks, the materials that might be on the shelf, the hoopla, digital, all those different things on this left-hand side. On the right-hand side, this limit database results on this side. This is going to be the side where you find your electronic or digital articles and resources. And so this moment you start putting filters on either side, one side goes away. So say I wanted to see all the books that are written on the topic of money. If I wanted to just look at the electronic resources, for instance, and maybe see what's in Bloomington, if I click include, what happens is everything on this right-hand side goes away and everything that's left will be books, okay? So using that same rationalization, if we're at the statewide and Ivy Online site and we go to Start with Discover, and I type in my first example of my two concepts, my income inequality and mental health, if I would do that and I would click it into this Start with Discover, I can go ahead and let's go ahead and income inequality and mental health. If I go ahead and click search, you'll see that I have two options. I have this one on the left for all the books, and then I have all the one for the digital resources. And so I want to make those results be a little bit smaller. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with a filter that a lot of teachers ask for. And many times a teacher will have certain source requirements. And they'll say, I want you to find 5 sources, or they'll say a certain number of sources. And then they'll say, these are the types of sources that I want. A very common one that you'll hear is a type of source called a peer-reviewed source, or something that can be found in an academic journal. Sometimes teachers will straight up just call it academic. They'll say, I need you to find academic sources. If that is the case, then if you go ahead and we click peer-reviewed journals or academic journals, in this case, a lot of times it's the same. If you go ahead and click here, we'll go ahead and take that 1,300 that we originally got, and it takes us down to 985. So that got rid of about 300. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to put in a publication date. Now, your teachers are going to have different opinions about this. Most of the time, we put in a 5-year frame. So 2021, 2026. And we do this because we want the most up-to-date research and information about this topic. unless we were doing some type of sweeping historical analysis of how something was in the past and we want to know what it's like, maybe compare it to now or do these different things. Unless you're doing something like that, if you're just reporting on what's happening and how like a topic like income inequality is impacting people, in current days, you typically stick like a 5-year frame. Okay. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to include it. And so then what that takes us to is 497 results, which again, that's over half. It's nearly just a third of what we originally started with. Now, once we do this, we are, we're coming up with a lot of different types of examples. And what I always do when I'm sitting one-on-one with a student, I'll say, let's just look at these titles. Do any of them look promising? Do any of them, just based off the titles alone, do you want to look at this more closely? I mean, I think that's all we're doing when we're looking at these titles. And so we can do this. I can do this and different reasons why I'm going to justify them. And a lot of times I'll look and see where they have been highlighted, where my keywords are highlighted. I want to see where it's showing up. I like to look where it's coming from. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to look at this one, this income inequality and mental health in adolescents during COVID-19. And so if I wanted to see this more closely, and this is just an example, if this was something I wanted to look at more closely after scrolling through all those titles, is I would check for full access. When I check for full access, what that's going to do is that is going to bring me to a page that contains a lot of good information. And so first of all, it's going to, remind me what the title is, give me some of that citation information if I was going to create one from scratch, tells me my source, where it's coming from, confirms all the volume, issue, pages, again, if that's necessary. I have some subject terms here that might be useful when I'm doing that keyword searching. Remember, when you're making those keywords, sometimes you're doing that and you're brand new to the topic. So it's okay if you don't know every single word. And sometimes this is a good way of doing it by looking at subject terms that are provided. Sometimes the author will also supply keywords that you might be able to use. Once you've done that, the next thing that you do is you look at the abstract. One of the nice things that you'll find in academic databases is that they provide something called an abstract. And an abstract is almost like if you were thinking like looking at a physical book and you wanted to either check it out or not, or maybe purchase it. If you look on the back side of those books, a lot of times they'll provide you with a couple paragraphs describing what the book is about. And they do this so you can make a decision on whether to move forward, but you don't have to read the whole book to know. It's just like this little piece of information so you can yay or nay it. Okay. And so once you look at this abstract, if you choose to look at it, there's a couple things that you can do. First of all, you can look at the actual article. You can decide to preserve it for another round of scrutiny or for reading later. If you go to this access options, sometimes you'll have a PDF. That will be the way it looks when you click it. And when you're looking at a PDF, it looks like this. A lot of times it looks like it's been cut out of a magazine with a razor, and it looks as good as it did when it was published between some covers. And so this is what a PDF version would look like. And, you can see it's 13 pages. I can scroll down. It has all this information. Looks pretty good. It has all the, you can see like the page numbers here. We can see where it's coming from. Another thing that I like about this PDF is that we have different features that will help documenting it later. We have citations. So APA, MLA, if you want to switch to that. It is, you could use that for your works cited or references page. Although I also always caution you to double, triple check to make sure the citations are correct. Next, you can go to this share button, this little backwards loop. It allows you to save it in Google Drive, OneDrive, or create a permalink if you want to access it later. Remember, a permanent link right here, like that, what you can access here, is different than up here. Up here will not get you around paywalls. Down here will get you around paywalls. So if you are just saving the links and that's what you're doing while you're just sort of like going back and forth and deciding on your sources, make sure you always get the permalink, because a lot of these resources are protected by a paywall and you'd have to pay for the articles otherwise. But that's just something to keep in mind. Another thing you can do if you're on your own device or you have your own laptop, you could always download these articles to your device. You can also print. So for any Indianapolis students, you could always print at our library. I assume that most libraries around the state have a printing option, but all students have $5 of printing that they have on their accounts every semester. That's just already there that they can use to print. So consider that. Another thing about the PDF version that I like is that you can listen to it. So you see these headsets here. If you click here, you can see that there is an option to listen to this and to also download the recording of the audio for your document. So if you're a person who's an audio type of learner, or you're already like reinforcing your you need help to remember what you've read, I would suggest that you listen to this when you are trying to grapple with the new information. I think it's very nice. So that's a PDF. Next, there is oftentimes an option for online full text. So if you click this online full text, this is the same article. You can see it looks different. It looks different. We don't have the headings. We don't have the formatting at the bottom and the top. We don't have any page numbers. It's really just very smooth. But again, same words. Now you'll see these options like I just showed you, but there is one that is new. And the new option is this translate button. So when you are looking at the online version, if you click on the headsets, it's going to allow you to listen to it like you just, like you did with the PDF. And in fact, it gives you even some more options in terms of text highlighting. However, if you translate it, say you speak French, and you just understand language better in French versus English, I suggest you go ahead and change your document to the language that makes best sense to you. I translated this into French, and I think it took me less than 5 seconds. Now, when this happens, what you cannot do is listen to it, unfortunately. So the audio does not translate. But if you do need a little bit of assistance in just with anything part of the academics, whether it's the language, whether it's the way that you are consuming that information, they do have a few options, okay? The final thing that I'm going to show you here is this cited by 10. If you click on cited by 10, or if they're cited by 1 or cited by 400, whatever the case is, this is a good sign the higher the number is. If you see this cited by 10, I'm probably going to pay better attention. So if I click on this cited by 10, what this is going to do is this is going to show me other articles, the 10 other articles that were used that referenced this when they wrote this. In other words, other experts, other teams of researchers who are trying to learn more about mental health and adolescence and income inequality, they looked at this paper as a source when they were writing this paper. So that should tell you that that is probably a source that you should highly consider because other people are using them. Another thing, and bonus, you could also use these potentially as other sources. Each one of these are articles, and you could use them as for your paper. Another thing that you might want to look at is references. These are references or source material that these people used when they were developing their paper. So again, you can go forward. You can say, oh, wow, this is what they use this article for later. And then you can also go backwards and say, oh, but this is where they got all their information. And so this is a really nice way to just say, hey, here are my sources. And so I always like to show people every nook and cranny that really these sources, wherever that they just want to make sure you know they exist. And so once we do this here, we have this through here, we can just do this forever going with our keywords. I mean, that is absolutely something where we could do. But usually it's advised to do it a second time at least, to at least see what your other options are. So you could just go ahead and type in here again. Sometimes I usually just start back from the scratch or from the beginning. And so now I'm going to look at income and equality. But instead of mental health, what I'm going to type in will be anxiety and family, and then search. Now, when I do that, I just got 60 results, but that's not bad. You know, we started off with, I think, over 1,100 when we did it with income inequality and mental health. So we have fewer results, but I'm essentially talking about the same thing. So I think that's fine. 60 is a good number. It's not too huge like the millions that we got with money, but it's also not a failure. We're not getting 0 hits. We're not getting 1 or 2, although that can still be promising. And so this gives us something to work with. And you'll also notice that I got no books here, no ebooks, no book books. And so we're only just working with this side. So something I'm going to put in automatically is I'm going to put in 2021 to 2026. So that's going to take my 60 to close to 7. Okay. And so when I'm looking at close to 7, once I've, that got rid of a lot, but that's okay. But I could also maybe look at something like, 2016, because sometimes teachers are like, just look at the last 10 years. I mean, it's always going to depend on what your teachers say. Once you've done that, there are other places that you can go for sources. We looked at academic journals last time, but there's also things like news. Sometimes you'll see videos. Sometimes you'll see primary sources. But consider other source types that you might use. Another thing that you might look at would be these subject tags. These subject tags work just like social media tags. Like if you post a bunch of pictures of yourself and your family and things that when you traveled to wherever you went, if you want them to know where you were or some of the, people you were with, maybe the restaurants you ate at, you're going to use those words so people looking for those things will find your stuff. And so that's the same idea with these subject terms that libraries provide so people can find them more easily. And so these are some subjects that you might consider. No matter what we looked at here, this is the same process. Once you've applied your filters, the next step is just to click in and see if this is something that you want to keep. Besides start with Discover, we can also look in A to Z resources. Now, I mentioned that Start with Discover is different than A to Z resources, and the biggest difference is that Start with Discover looks at multiple databases at once. So this A to Z resources, we have 129 databases, individual. But when I am here and Start with Discover, I'm looking at nearly all of them, every single one of those without a red asterisk. I'm looking at all of the EBSCO ones at once versus going into them one by one. Now, to get into them one by one, a simple way is just looking at these featured databases, because I am going to talk about Academic Search Complete. Academic Search Complete can be found by clicking right here. It can also be found by clicking right here. And also all of these are alphabetized. So if I was an Academic Search Complete and I was hoping for some results, you can see this looks a little bit different than when we were plugging it in to Start with Discover. Now our fields are kind of stacked. So for this third example of keyword searching, I'm going to go ahead and type in, let's go ahead and say mental health, mental health. I'm going to put quote marks around it so the machine, the robot, the computer reads it as one word. If I took them away and look at mental and health, so that's always something the computer's kind of checking out, trying to figure out whether they need both mental health together or just mental and health. That will change the types of searches you do. And also those quotes, keep those words together if you want to think about them as just like moving them along versus individual words within the quotes. So we're going to put in quote marks mental health. We're also going to type in, and let's go ahead and say poverty. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead too. And what I like about this route is that we have predictive text options, which I really like. And then finally, we can go ahead and type in anxiety. Now remember, I'm just playing from these words that I had developed when I was looking at my keywords. Okay. And I'm also trying to look at this income inequality. I'm trying to figure out how it impacts all different types of people or how it can impacts the community and how, if I'm arguing that it's hurting them, well, then where's the support for that? So that's saying, hey, this isn't a good thing that everybody, some people are rich, some people are really poor, and we just can't seem to find a middle ground. Okay. And so if that's what we're trying to argue, then that's really important that we're using those keywords that we developed with our thesis. So these are all in that list. These are ones I could have added. I'm going to go ahead and put in the peer-reviewed limiter so you can see that they're below here. I'm going to put in past 5 years, and then I'm going to go ahead and click search. Once I click search, I have 445 results. At any point, I could add more filters if I wanted. I could go down here. I could look at different source types. It looks like there's not a lot of options because I already limited them. I could look at different subject terms. So if I wanted to narrow it down more, I certainly could. I could narrow it down by geography if I chose. Every time you add a new word or a new filter, it's just going to just shift things just a little bit. It's almost like what happens when you leave 5 minutes early versus 5 minutes late? What are all the things in the world that could happen that are different? Well, this is the same kind of thing with research. You put in a different word, you put in a different filter, you're going to get different results. And so say we have this 445. Now, what I like about this view is that you see how many cited bys, like right from the beginning. So I see 16 here. I had 1 here. That's okay. It's 1. But when I see something that's 16, I'm like, yay, maybe I want to look at that more closely. This has 9. I'm not just looking at that, but I'm also looking at the titles. So these things, I'm just looking at my options. And I will go back to that one that I saw earlier with 16. And so if I want to look at this more closely, I can click on the title. I could also, especially if I wanted to read the abstract, I could also click here to see the abstract. So I don't even really have to click into it if I don't want to. I could also go ahead and just access those options if I wanted to, the PDF and online full text. I could just do it from there. And I could also just pop to this cited by 16 if I wanted. So no matter what I do, I hope you're starting to see these patterns of these things that I can do as I search the library site. Now, once I click into this should all look very familiar to you because this is exactly what it looked like. We start with Discover once we started to find our options or get our results. And here we go. And so do we want to keep it? Do we want to see PDF? It is right here. We can get our citations, we can share it, we can download it, we can print it, we can listen to it. So we can do all these things with this text, okay? And so that's how we'll find it when we are looking at Start with Discover. And so, when we are looking at the at Academic Search Complete. And Academic Search Complete is it's just a really good place to go for one database that has a lot of information. In general, if you go to Start with Discover, you're going to get the most hits, but it's because it's looking at everything at once, but it's also going to require you to refine your searches a couple times and absolutely add filters. Now, you would have to do the same thing when you're looking at Academic Search Complete. However, the biggest difference is that when you're looking at Academic Search Complete, you're looking at one database, not over 100 databases. You'll still play around with different keywords. You'll still apply filters, but you won't be applying them to over 1 million. You might be applying them to a couple hundred, sometimes a couple dozen, just because you're looking at one spot. And hopefully that makes sense. Finally, what we're going to do is we are going to go to A to Z resources where you can go to subject-specific databases. Now, subject-specific databases work the same way that subject-specific, or, when you go shopping for clothes, if you wanted to, or you go shopping for anything, we have stores out there like Target that has a lot of different things from gardening to pet food to flip-flops, it has everything. But a lot of times we also have these specialty stores like Ace Hardware. You're going to find things to fix your house or to, work on your yard. Claire's Boutique, you're going to go someplace to get your ears pierced or to find some headbands. And so they only contain what they specialize in. And so the same kind of thing works when you're looking at specialized databases. They're going to have less information because they're typically smaller, but they're going to only have the information that you need, just not as much, if that makes sense. But hopefully it'll be more direct. And so if I was looking for something for sociology, if I clicked on subjects and I scroll down, we do have a tab for social sciences. If I click here, then filter databases, we can see we have 36 databases that could potentially fall under that. But I'll fast track it for you. Today, what we're going to look at is we're actually going to be looking at the one for social sciences, full text. So what that means is this is going to be, you can always see a description of what these databases are about, but you can see that it covers a wide array of subjects, including addiction studies, ethics, public welfare, urban studies, and more, covering the latest concepts, theories, and methods from both applied and theoretical aspects of the social sciences. This full text resource provides access to the most important social science journals. All right, so let's see what it's about. Oh my goodness, it looks just like Academic Search Complete. That's okay. You know what? The secret is that it's all by EBSCO. So because EBSCO is our publisher for so many of our databases, we're fortunate because a lot of them look the same. And so here, if I'm going to look in this specialized database and I go ahead and I type in, let's go ahead and say, we'll start with our first one. We'll go with income inequality and mental health, and we'll use all the predictive texts. We could say past 10 years if we wanted to. We could say peer-reviewed if we wanted to. All those things we like, but also we don't have to because they're options. I have 19. Okay, and so all of these results came in, I can see from the past 10 years, they're full text, they are peer reviewed. If at any point I want to change my mind, I could unclick peer reviewed and apply it. There's always a chance once it's over. It looks like we added a couple more. And but I could also see if there are more options, different source types. It looks like academic only. We could see if subjects are here. But either way, this we got less results as I predicted, but they're not bad. I mean, we have mental health challenges, endless growth does not bring joy, income inequality, human development and happiness. I'm curious about that. Things related to, the extremes of mental health. So these are things that we and if we don't like anything, we just add new words. And so all of these are so good, and all of these are so are all these different methods in learning how to look at these different topics and to find research. And sometimes one place is a lot better than the other. I mean, I tend to start with Discover before I start to look at these A to Z resources. But I also have colleagues who prefer to go straight to Academic Search Complete because they don't want to look at all those options that will always come with Start with Discover. It just really depends on the type of person you are and the type of research that doesn't give you anxiety and doesn't make you nervous. If it's better for you to get more hits and then filter down from that, then I'd say start with Discover. If you like to start with fewer and then play around with keywords and try to find a match that way, go to Academic Search Complete or a subject-specific database. Finally, I do want to talk about some local resources. Now, I know that it's always going to be dependent on your local area. You know, I live in Indy, so I feel that's so central. I did want to show things that would appeal to anybody. And even in Indianapolis, given that it's the capital city of the state, there are things that would also be helpful for anyone. So if you go to one place that I would suggest that you consider is something called findhelp.org. Findhelp.org is a place that I recommend to many human services students or people who want to be social workers in the future. And so if you wanted more assistance if you were trying to find assistance within your community, you could use this site anywhere in our country. So say you wanted to know about housing, okay? You wanted to learn about maybe affordable housing, or you wanted to go on with what we were talking about, like with mental health. So say I was looking at mental health still, I could type in mental health. I could also click on health here. If I was looking at housing or trying to find out about the income inequality or things tied to it, I could always look at money. I could always look at housing, all those different things, and just click right into it. But I would identify what I want. Then I would put in my zip code. My zip code, I live on the east side of Indianapolis. So when I click Find Programs, and I next verify that I'm a human, what comes up are different mental health facilities and hospitals and doctors and professionals who are close to where I am in Indianapolis. So I got over 821 results, which is pretty amazing. It will tell me where to go. So Eskenazi is one of the hospitals here in Indianapolis. It shows me the people that they serve and what they specialize in. It gives me a phone number. It gives me an address, and it tells me what their hours are. I love that. It also tells me how to contact them. I could look for things for the VA. I could look at things in Hendricks County versus Marion County. I could look at things that are specifically for mental health versus more, like Eskenazi has mental health services, but they could also help you if you broke your leg. And so it's one of those places. So whatever you're looking at, I just feel like this is an incredible, incredible resource. Another place that I'm going to suggest to people, particularly our Indianapolis crew, but also anybody who is interested in topics that pertain to Indiana law, or changes in legislation, or just updates on things that impact us, education, money, policies, etc. And so if I wanted to look at a place called mirrorindy.org, that would take me to a free publication that is used quite a bit here with different social issues and topics. And Mirror Indy has done a wonderful job with breaking down different topics that I am seeing on headline news on newspapers that are published throughout our entire country and world. And so, whether we are talking about data centers, whether we are talking about, different types of cultural events, whether we are talking about different things happening at parks, whether we're talking about in things like things that are happening with some of our elected officials. I mean, it's just a really good place to go. So if I wanted to learn more about health here in Indianapolis or mental health and follow my train of thought with my research, if I click health here, I could click health here and get everything I wanted on the topic. And I could also, so I could look at any of these different things that come up. I could also click in here and I could type in something like mental health. And I could see all these results. I could see what happens when I type in income inequality. Okay, it looks like I got 9 hits. Like say if I wanted to look up housing, I got over 1,000. So these are all things that tie to Indiana. A lot of things with Indianapolis, but not in a lot of things Indianapolis and also Indiana, depending on what the topics are, especially how widespread the impact is. So I would definitely encourage anyone from wherever they are in the state to also check this out. So those are some of the things that I always like to cover when I'm speaking to a group of students about research. It doesn't happen fast, but it does get easier the more you do it. And one of the things I really love about habitually being in the process of research is that it takes me, I feel like naturally what is happening is that I spend a lot of my time here in this state of asking questions. Like I live my life, I see things in the community and then my school, my work, and my job and personal life, and I say, I see this thing, I don't 100% understand it, and why is this happening? I want to know why this is happening. And so if that is happening, I just want to know why. And so these are all the questions that I have. And so I'm always peppering things with questions. And so I say that because I believe other people are the same way. And I believe that research is more natural than people believe, maybe, especially if you haven't ever done it, or especially if you've always associated it with academics. But I'm here to tell you that it happens all the time. You're already pros, you're already people of Google. And so this is something that I know you can do well. I'm confident you can find keywords related to your topics. I'm confident that you can find databases that relate to what you need. And then I know that you can find information from appropriate sources there and in other places that I've shown you. So best of luck. And if you have any questions, the final thing that I'm going to refer you to, let's go here. Wait. Is to our contact information one more time. If you want further assistance or you would like to talk to a librarian after this is all done, from the statewide site, go to your campus library website, find your campus library. So I'll go ahead and show Indianapolis. And at the very bottom, here is our phone number. Here's how you could contact us. So we are open. Our hours are up here. They're also here. And every campus has their hours posted, their days of the week that they are open. And if you look on that very bottom, you'll find that phone number where you can contact them. So with that said, best of luck. I wish you well. And I hope to see everyone in the future, either in the classroom or in the library. Thank you very much.